Why'd you stop being a diversity officer?
I just thought it was a useless thing. There's a better way to go about doing this.
In the U.S. in 2020, DEI was a $3.4 billion industry.
Every big company.
They feel like they have to. They have to say something. They have to signal to the world that they're doing something.
Is it effective?
No. In fact, it seems to be doing worse. It seems to be making people less likely to interact with people who are unlike them. After a training where you hear things about microaggressions, if you ask somebody what they do for a living, somehow that's racist, right? If you learn that, then why would you take a chance?
I better not talk to Eric because I might say something wrong.
Precisely. So now inclusion means I'm going to silence myself and not talk to the black people.
They know that the people who have profited most by DEI is white people. But they don't know that because the people they're trusting is telling them just the opposite. If you want to find out who's getting the preference in the jobs, it's still white people and primarily white women right now, right? You want to find out who's getting the food stamps, it's white women. You want to find out who's the majority on welfare, it's still white people.
DEI it's not anti-racist, it's the only source of racism on university campuses.
The white male Americans, you've created a problem for the white working class and the white underclass, but you want to make them think that blacks have created that problem. So you attack DEI as though that was an instrument that gave blacks an advantage over whites.
As the great civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." But how do we get just there? As the nation continues to grapple with the complexities of racial equality, a glaring question emerges. Despite the widespread adoption of diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) programs, why do many Black Americans still face persistent barriers to opportunity and equality? What lies beneath the surface of these well-intentioned initiatives, and how can we bridge the gap between rhetoric and reality? In this video, we will be taking a keen look at a breakout on recent events where the President of the United States, Donald Trump, attacks the DEI and shuts it down once and for all. We will also be exploring the very role of the DEI and its impact on the minority race of America, particularly in the Black community. Before we continue, don't forget to support our works by hitting the thumb up button, share videos with friends and families to keep spreading our informative reports, and subscribe to our channel to stay tuned in. Without further ado, let us hit the road.
Growing up in New York, you could say I was a default liberal. My political opinions, to the extent I had them, weren't deeply thought out. They just were. My philosophy was live and let live. Say what you want, do what you want. Just don't physically harm or abuse another person. I also never thought much about my skin color, or anybody else's. For me and my friends, race was never more than a punchline to a joke. After graduating from college, I got my dream job as an engineer at a major toy company, Hasbro. Everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. And then one day, the company decided that all the engineers would have to attend a training session on implicit bias, racial awareness, and intersectionality. This was my introduction to the mad, mad world of corporate DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion.
DEI, as it is simply put out, is a generic label given to the wide-ranging measures that aim to promote fair treatment and ensure full participation from people of all backgrounds. It is particularly geared to represent people who are historically marginalized and underrepresented. In 2023, the Supreme Court struck down affirmative action in higher education. Since then, a dozen states have passed anti-DEI laws. While DEI advocates would say that it remedies effects from decades of exclusionary policies and practices for underrepresented communities, the realest words on the streets is that DEI policies, 1, actually don't address inequalities, 2, wastes public money, and 3, breaks anti-discrimination laws.
What is DEI? Repackaged affirmative action. What did affirmative action do? It kept black people at the bottom of every socioeconomic statistic in the United States of America for 50 years. Why did it do it? Let me explain. You say that America is racist and that businesses are also racist. Let's put a pin in that. I'll accept that argument. What is your solution to this? Let the same racist country and the same racist businesses decide what black people are elevated in the black community. Now, what type of sense does that make? to let your enemy, who you say is racist, decide who your leadership is going to be and what people are elevated in your community. And that's why we're still at the bottom of every socioeconomic statistic in America. They've chosen a bunch of stepping fetchits that will do their bidding. It is not about ending discrimination, y'all. It's about controlling discrimination. It's about them deciding, not the meritocracy.
That's not all. There is, in fact, a colossal heap of numerous other ridiculous complaints about the DEI program buzzing in the same direction with what the brother just said.
And there seemed to be this question of you're either diverse or you're qualified. All I could think about was the fact that I currently hold an honorary doctorate. I also hold a Juris Doctorate. I also hold a bachelor's. I also technically hold the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in the Civil Air Patrol. And I actually practiced law for almost 2 decades, in addition to serving on various boards, in addition to being a prior state lawmaker. And there are those that would make some people believe that because I happen to be black and or a woman, that somehow, even though I can rattle off all the qualifications in the world, my blackness makes me unqualified.
And so you're now scapegoating black folks and saying that's the reason that so many white people are unemployed, because something called DEI. But let them remove it, because it didn't serve black people that much anyway to start with. Affirmative action never really served black people.
DEI it's not anti-racist. It's the only source of racism on university campuses. There is still old white supremacy style white racism in other pockets of the country, but on universities and corporations, the only kind of racism is the DEI kind. So it's the opposite of what it says it is, and I think more people are now seeing that.
And then Charlemagne the God comes in and adds to the commotion with the most hilarious statement of them all.
DEI. DEI stands for Dr. Dre, Eazy-E, and Ice Cube.
What the periphrasis used here literally means is that the diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI programs, were never run for what it was meant in the first place, which is equity and inclusion for the black community.
And honestly, I'm not surprised these programs didn't work. And here's why. It's just corporate PR. They want good vibes. And also, they want to cover their ass, okay? Did you know that if a company gets sued for civil rights violations, just having a DEI program will be counted as evidence in their favor, even if the program doesn't do shit, okay? It's the I have a black friend of the legal system, right? We don't need corporate DEI. Yes, we want diversity and equity and inclusion. The truth about DEI is that although it's well-intentioned, it's mostly garbage, okay? It's kind of like the Black Little Mermaid. Just because racists hate it doesn't mean it's good. And you know I'm right, because every one of you has sat through one of those diversity training sessions and thought, this is some bullshit. And it's not just you. Over 900 studies have shown that DEI programs don't make the workplace better for minorities. In fact, it can actually make things worse because of the backlash effect. Remember DARE from school? Y'all remember DARE? Yeah. She said, woo. DEI training is like DARE for racism. And you all know how effective that was. I was sitting there going, oh shit, there's a ton of fun drugs I should try. I didn't even know about Molly. Thanks, Officer John. But the biggest failure of DEI is that the number of black people in power at big companies is basically the same as it was 5 years ago. In fact, maybe the only thing that DEI has accomplished is giving racist white people cover to be openly racist.
And why all these fuss in the first place? It is because, on the 22nd of January 2025, the White House released a fact sheet article. President Donald J. Trump ends DEI madness. Yes, Donald Trump, the 47th serving president of the United States, has recently signed the order to end the DEI process that's been in place in the United States since the 1960s.
My administration has taken action to abolish all discriminatory diversity, equity, and inclusion nonsense, and these are policies that were absolute nonsense throughout the government and the private sector. With the recent yet somewhat unexpected great Supreme Court decision just made, America will once again become a merit-based country. You have to hear that word, merit-based country.
But what does ending the DEI mean? Why is the DEI being attacked? However, let us have a look at what brought about the DEI process in the first place and how it affected the minority race. DEI has gained a foothold and thrive at organizations, with the label used to describe programs that tackled discrimination based on gender, sexual orientation, religion, and disability. In the United States, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, are organizational frameworks that seek to promote the fair treatment and full participation of all people, particularly groups who have historically been underrepresented or subject to discrimination based on identity or disability. But then we asked, what does it mean putting an end to this process? Haven't the non-white race living in America benefited from the DEI project? The answer to this is no. With the blacks being the unmentioned center of this process, the black man has known one thing for sure after birth: to work. From the minute the slave ships landed them on unknown shores, they had worked their backs up to where they are today. Nothing was ever handed out to them, except being used and extorted. Recently, Reverend Al Sharpton, the president of the National Action Network, alluded to this week concerning the DEI program being stopped. Why do we have DEI? He asked a crowd gathered at a black church a few blocks from the White House. We have DEI because you denied us diversity, you denied us equity, you denied us inclusion. The American system has played the black man to thinking he's been given a gift, except nothing was ever given, it was earned. DEI was a program meant to include the minority race of America, but in a real sense, it was a program meant to allow resources available to the white man and limited to the blacks. For instance, the black population in America were segregated for a long time even after their emancipation. They were not allowed to have better jobs or attend the best schools. They were even not to be seen in most prestigious places. The DEI was implemented to allow these minor communities to thrive by allowing them into better schools, special organizations, government works and resources like scholarships, grants, and a lot more.
They did the same thing after the Civil War by saying the reason you're impoverished is not because the planters of the South are a bunch of greedy robber barons, but because these black people now, who you had working in the fields for free for 400 years, is now working for a salary. And they're taking away the salary you could have had. You know, you weren't working in that field for 400 years. You didn't have no salary picking cotton, so how you gonna blame the black man who you gotta pay now to pick the cotton for taking your job when you never had that job to begin with? Matter of fact, most of you were unemployed then and didn't understand why you were unemployed, because I was working for free.
Professor James Small, Live on I Never Knew TV on YouTube, said in the interview, how Donald Trump has played both the white and black American population by attacking DEI.
The base of the present government led by Mr. Trump is the working class, the unemployed, and the unemployable white class, as well as the lower middle class, probably even the middle class whites, who feel threatened by any real competition coming from any other racial or ethnic groups. And since the largest racial or ethnic group in the country, people could say it's Hispanics, but no, most of the Hispanics in the country are not citizens, so you can't say they're competition, because they could do what they're doing right now, put them on a plane and fly them out. They can't do that to the black American population. So we are the primary competition for white male Americans.
The keen professor claimed that the working class, the unemployed, and the unemployable white folks feel threatened, as they think that what should be theirs is being thrown at undeserved folks of different racial backgrounds, so as to provide diversity. Professor James Small, countering this, addressed the ignorance of such white populace. What you don't have can't be taken from you, as you may never have worked for it, he says.
It'll be good for black people to see nothing much is going to change in their environment if they take away all of this stuff. That's the trouble element here, is the ignorance of the general white population who buy into thinking that somehow, because they're not at the top as they fantasize they should be, without having slave labor, that somebody has taken something from them that they've never had. So take the DEI out and let's see, and you'll still see you still don't have it because you never prepared yourself for it.
Professor Small had also soundly reminded white Americans that they are the ones who have profited more from the DEI process, not blacks. And shutting down the program by the US president is more or less the same as shooting oneself in the foot, as the move was against his own self-interest and that of the white community.
The white male Americans, you've created a problem for the white working class and the white underclass, but you want to make them think that blacks have created that problem. So you attack DEI as though that was an instrument that gave blacks an advantage over whites. And that's really what it's doing. They know that the people who have profited most by DEI is white people. But they don't know that because the people they're trusting is telling them just the opposite. If you want to find out who's getting the preference in the jobs, it's still white people and primarily white women right now, right? You want to find out who's getting the food stamps, it's white women. You want to find out who's the majority on welfare, it's still white people. But they don't want to accept that about themselves. You really have to show them that they're told that black people are getting all these advantages because of DEA. They're being given jobs they're not qualified for, what they don't deserve, and that's why you're unemployed. Because they don't want them to know you're unemployed because we've sent all of the factories overseas to get cheap labor.
Fact.
And that's why you're unemployed. But rather they're going to say, no, you're unemployed because this DEA is giving black and brown people an advantage that puts them above you. Now, when they realize that's not true, his 4 years will be over. And he won't be able to run for president again anyway. So he would have used and gotten white people to vote against their own self-interest one more time by making them thinking that they're voting against black interests. And they end up voting against their own self-interest.
That said, we need not further ask why the DEI program is suddenly under fire. Ackman, a famous billionaire investor, last year posted on X criticizing DEI as inherently a racist and illegal movement in its implementation, even if it purports to work on behalf of the so-called oppressed. Some white critics also claim DEI programs are discriminatory and attempt to solve racial discrimination by disadvantaging other groups, particularly white Americans.
DEI is just a rebranded version of hating white people.
DEI, in this case, stands for divisive, erroneous, and insidious.
DEI, which stands for didn't earn it.
Discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination.
A lot of white aristocrats and politicians are against the DEI program, as they suggest it mostly puts the wrong and unqualified people at the right job, trying to prove diversity.
DEI breeds complacency, Dana, and complacency kills.
We're going to have doctors who don't know how to perform heart surgery, and we're going to have planes that are falling out of the sky.
Boeing recently bragged not about being the best in the business, but about surpassing its diversity quotas. Oh, goody. But then, not so good, a door flying off one of Boeing's 737 Supermaxes.
I'm sorry, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
I mean, honestly, when I see a black pilot, I'm not worried that we're going to crash. I'm worried that we're going to get pulled over.
Also, seeing that the white skin isn't the first choice when trying to prove diversity, quite a number of white Americans now see the DEI process as a tool against them, and that they are now being racially neglected. But how could that be if almost the entire leadership of the company is white?
But yeah, they're blaming DEI for everything, even that bridge in Baltimore. They called Baltimore's mayor the DEI mayor, like he was given the job for being black. Then they said the shipping company was too focused on DEI instead of safety. But almost the entire leadership of the company is white. No black people.
Some also claim that most minority races are being snubbed for other minority races. Although it seems to look like it, a lot of people seem to think that the DEI program has done more harm to the minority race than good. It now appears that every now and then, a non-white folk is being appointed to a high government or company executive role. Their qualifications are now being overlooked, and they are seen as more of a diverse choice.
Sadly enough, I did not find one single study which has found that diversity training, in fact, leads to more diversity.
When you are flying on an airplane with your loved ones, which every one of us in this room has, do you pray that your plane lands safely and gets you to your destination, or do you pray that the pilot has a certain skin color? I think we all know the answer to that question, and as President Trump said yesterday, it's common sense. People should not be hired based on their disabilities, based on their skin color, their gender, their race. None of that matters. What matters to this president and this administration is how well you can do your job, and the American people agree with that sentiment. So it's about competence, skill, and merit. And so the president is focused on ensuring that the most competent individuals, the best and the brightest in this country, are in positions in this federal government, especially when it comes to public safety.
Donald Trump, in his speech on the 22nd of January 2025, made his reasons to end DEI clear. It is about getting the best man for the job and promoting excellence. A speech which racked a mixed feeling on the free world. The DEI program is therefore going away, a program which most black scholars assume to have played the average black American man, other minority American race, to feel short and undeserved of their success. A nation's quest for equality was what drove the implementation of the DEI initiatives in the United States. DEI policy emerged from affirmative action in the United States. The legal term, affirmative action, was first used in Executive Order signed by President John F. Kennedy on the 6th of March 1961, which included a provision that government contractors take affirmative action to ensure that applicants are employed and employees are treated fairly during employment, without regard to their race, creed, color, or national origin. It was used to promote actions that achieve non-discrimination. The idea was, and still is, pretty simple. But everyone deserves a fair shot regardless of their race, gender, sexual orientation, or any other characteristic that makes them who they are. DEI is about recognizing that not everyone starts from the same place, and that systems of discrimination exist. It's not about giving unfair advantages, but about leveling the playing field. Imagine a race where some people start 50 meters ahead. DEI is just trying to get everyone to the same starting line, as the white and black man certainly do not have the same privileges from their births on. Where most white-born often enjoy resources limited to the black community, the DEI has been placed to help push these limited resources to the minority community and balance social affairs. These can be resources such as going to well-academically equipped school on scholarship, which might be too expensive for an average black man, training and educating the minority to better equip them in getting the same jobs as the whites, adopting blacks into the government sectors, so as to give them a kind of representation and voice, getting better healthcare facilities and other utilities on reduced price to most neglected minor neighborhood, fostering a sense of belonging and inclusion of all individuals to promote greater well-being, happiness, and success, increased access to opportunity, and reduced racial disparities. However, with the DEI ended now, these supposed privileges are seen to be also exterminated. And yes, supposed is the fitting term used for the situation in hand, as the DEI was never really used to leverage these aforementioned social privileges to the black community. Going forward, let us examine the workplace of the DEI called the DEIA. First off, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, DEIA, is the work or employment section of the DEI. Programs labeled as DEIA encompass a broad range of lawful initiatives that are supposedly meant to also create fairer workplaces, ensuring opportunities aren't limited based on race, ethnicity, disability, sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity. Yes, these initiatives were meant to focus on not selecting specific candidates for hire. Rather, they were meant to aim for fairer processes, such as recruiting at underrepresented institutions or ensuring fairness in promotion criteria, which helps address systemic inequities without disadvantaging any individual. Suffice it to say, nonetheless, that these grand initiatives of the DEIA was never implemented for the benefit of the black community. It was a hoax. Mr. Eric Smith, a research fellow at the Cato Institute and an associate professor of rhetoric at York College of Pennsylvania, stated in this article, which appeared in Discourse magazine on February 21, 2024.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that portray Black Americans as perpetual victims aren't doing us any favors. My impetus for dedicating the bulk of my career to combating diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) initiatives began on a listserv for rhetoric and composition, the field in which I teach as a professor. Upon hearing a well-received speech claiming that the teaching of standard English to Black students was a form of racism, I wrote an email questioning the efficacy of that argument. My inquiry induced a level of opprobrium I did not expect. I was called a white supremacist, and blatant lies were spread about me on social media. Besides these robust attempts to degrade me, I noticed a consistent infantilization of anyone Black who was brave enough to speak up against me. Mind you, this extremely woke listserv was a safe place to voice disdain for anyone who refused to embrace a victim narrative. No bravery required. But in order to abide by that narrative, anyone Black had to be cast as a downtrodden victim, punching up and speaking truth to power. Anyone Black except me, of course. For wanting Black students to have the utmost agency and to flourish in today's society, I, a Black man, was shunned by whites and Blacks alike. The U.S. is currently celebrating Black History Month, and I've been asked to share my thoughts about how this month of celebration aligns with DEI initiatives. The answer to that question depends on the type of DEI. Some DEI initiatives align with the classical liberal values of the civil rights movement and indeed of America's founding, such as freedom and equal opportunity for all, regardless of skin color. Other versions of DEI, however, are undergirded by critical social justice, CSJ, an ideology that pits whites and Blacks against each other. Whites are perpetual oppressors, and Blacks are perpetually oppressed. This variation of DEI, which I refer to as CSJ-DEI, is the ideology that was on display during the aforementioned listserv debacle. It insists on the perpetual victim status of Black Americans, and in so doing, is ideologically opposed to the celebration of Black Americans, because it focuses on their trials, not their triumphs. Black History Month is supposed to be about Black empowerment, but CSJ-DEI depends on Black disempowerment.
DEI has evolved and morphed a lot over the past decades. An interest in diversity education grew in the 1960s, following the civil rights movement. The movement started as a way to advocate for justice and equality for African Americans. In 1964, the passage of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act made it illegal to discriminate against anyone who belonged to a protected class. Many organizations adopted diversity education as a way to avoid litigation. Over the years, when you look at what diversity education has focused on, there hasn't ever really been a specific and explicit focus on Black employees and their unique experiences until George Floyd. Prior to George Floyd, Black people were viewed as part of the subgroup of people of color. Some argue that DEI efforts that focus on Black people do not take into consideration other communities that experience marginalization. But when you peel back the layers and examine every marginalized community, those who are Black or have Black proximity within those marginalized communities experience the most severe forms of subjugation. Adam B. Coleman, author of Black Victim to Black Victor and the founder of Wrong Speak Publishing, had also stated in an article published May 24, 2024,
I am a proud Black man. DEI undermines us. Am I not good enough to compete? Am I being hired because I'm Black and fulfill some quota? Or do I stand out from the crowd because of my competency? These are the questions Black people like me are forced to consider in this new corporate environment that overtly wants to elevate people based on the complexion of their skin. It's a policy philosophy that creates doubt not only within the minds of the minorities who are trying to navigate successfully in corporate America, but their colleagues as well who aren't sure if the person standing beside them is there for the same reasons as them. I understand the motivation for wanting to help people that some feel are disadvantaged by ensuring a fairer environment for everyone, no matter their ethnicity, sex, or sexuality. But the problem with DEI is that in practice, it is inconsistent with the message that discrimination is bad because it engages in discriminating against some to elevate others. And in so doing, they aren't setting an equal playing field for all, but skewing the field to create an ideologically satisfying outcome. And no one likes it when there are favorites in a competitive market, including the people who didn't ask to be anointed. As a black man who has worked in the IT field for well over a decade, I never once questioned why I was being hired for a position prior to the popularization of DEI. There was a solid chemistry in the room during the interviews that resulted in job offers. But after the death of George Floyd, I routinely began to wonder if the job I was hired for was given to me out of some kind of racial motivation instead of thanks to my capabilities as a professional. And for a moment, I questioned if the other black men in my work environment were also beneficiaries of a diversity agenda. Yes, I, a black man, fell into that trap. Progressives like to pretend it is racism and wondered if my black co-workers were diversity hires, and I am not the only one. Over time, of course, I realized that like me, the other black men I work with are highly capable, intelligent, and competent, and it would be unfair for me to presume any of us didn't deserve to be standing where we were. But this is one of the many fundamental problems with DEI. It creates paranoia even among the people who theoretically benefit the most from it.
Further looking in, the failure of DEI did not equate to black progress. So why do blacks keep fighting for it? The truth is, the black community understands the redeeming quality of disposition conveyed by diversity, equity, and inclusion if it someday would be justly implemented without any deception or ethnocentrism. For decades, black leaders have championed diversity, equity, and inclusion as a means to correct systemic inequalities. Yet, after more than 50 years, DEI has failed black communities while reinforcing white power structures. If DEI was truly about dismantling systemic oppression, why have white women been its greatest beneficiaries while black families and generational wealth continue to fall further behind? So it's indeed not surprising if Trump's dismantling of the DEI programs prompted strong opposition from black leaders who rushed to defend these initiatives. But the harsh truth is, the DEI has never served black people the way it has benefited white women. Rather than dismantling systemic barriers, DEI has acted as a Trojan horse for preserving white supremacy, giving white women disproportionate access to economic, career, and leadership advantages, while black Americans remain locked out of true progress. For black women, this realization is particularly disheartening, as their emotional labor and advocacy have long been manipulated to push agendas that have done nothing to build black wealth or strengthen black families. There have been a lot of voices and arguments on the DEI program, even before Trump. But only a few questions really matters now. How would this affect the minority race? Who benefited the most from DEI? Did President Donald Trump just dislodge the black privilege? That brings us to the end of yet another important video segment, and we're glad you made it to the end with us. However, if you found this video informative, then please take a moment to hit the thumb button, share with friends and families to keep spreading our eye-opening black narrative, and comment below. We are always eager to hear from you and learn from your experiences. By subscribing to our channel, you'll get access to more content that is designed to inform, inspire, and empower your mind. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.